All right, I'm here with Matt Rose. He covers the Calgary Stampeders for Sportsnet. Thanks for coming on the program, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, what I always like to ask my guests is, I always like to find out their superhero origin story. So, how did you get from high school kid to being able to be in the sports field, and in particular covering the CFL?
Yeah, it was a long journey. Took a year off out of high school. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Ended up going to broadcasting school at Mount Royal here in Calgary. From there, 2-year program. In between my first and second year, I was working at a restaurant, was serving a table, saw that they had like an envelope that was branded with a company that I knew worked here in Calgary, Rogers, who owns Sportsnet, and just kind of mentioned that I was in school. The guy I was having dinner turned out to be my current boss.
Oh,
Brought
wow.
me in for a little tour, he called it. It was more of an interview. And then, so I got a job basically between my first and second years of school. That was probably almost 7 years ago now. Coming up in October, that'll be 7 years. So, just kind of grinded, doing the background type of stuff for a long time in radio, and then, realized that I really wanted to start doing a little bit more myself. I had been doing a little bit of stuff, doing some audio for the Calgary Flames and things like that. But our station wasn't doing much with the Stampeders. So it was a beat that was open that I could make my own. And 3 years later, it's something I'm extremely proud of. I do stamps reports for our station 5 days a week, go to all the games, go to practice whenever I can. Like I am the morning show producer in Calgary as well on Sportsnet 960. So sometimes the timing doesn't work, but luckily, I guess that'd be one, glass half full type thing about the pandemic is the fact that I can still do all my media availabilities and that type of thing without having to attend every practice. Obviously, I'd like to be there so I can watch and, figure things out for myself. But that's just not a luxury that I have. So, I get there as much as I can. I'm there almost all the time. And that's pretty much it, man. It's been a wild journey, a pretty crazy one, but 7 years later, I'm really happy with where I'm at.
Covering the Stamps, now you have that the season's now back in full swing. What was it like for you as somebody covering the league, and then things kind of shut down, and then that uncertainty? I mean, we don't even have to get into the XFL stuff, but like now that things are back in the swing of things, how are things feeling now after a big layoff before you can start covering the team again?
Yeah, it was a strange 18, 20, 21 months, like depends on what you want to count it as, since the Stampeders, lost in the West final or the West semifinal in 2019. Obviously, there was a lot of questions about the league for that first year. It was one of those things where, for me, I just kind of sat back and waited for things to happen. Like there wasn't much I was going to be able to do about it. Luckily enough, I have other things apart from the Stampeders that I follow as well here in Calgary. So there were things that were keeping me busy. And, I was checking in with the team every once in a while, but they didn't have much to say, right? Like that was the whole thing with the XFL. Like I really felt like that was just a way for the CFL to kind of like, hey, we're still around. But then, it is what it is. I'm happy that we're back. I'm excited to get fans back in the stands. I'm excited to kind of get back to doing the normal media stuff because I really don't. I'm not one for Zoom. I can't really stand it. Doesn't really allow you to, get the relationship with the players that you really need, especially in the CFL when there's so many guys around. Like you got to get to know them. So I'm excited for the pandemic to kind of kick rocks and we can start moving into some normalcy. It was a strange time, but yeah, I'm just happy to be covering the league again.
Yeah. So now that things are back in full swing, and now you're at practices, what's the difference between, so first of all, let's get into Levi Mitchell, because he seems to be the guy, kind of the one that's known even beyond just Canada and the United States as one of the big time players there. I know he seems to be dealing with a little bit of injury issue, and he was coming off of shoulder surgery. So what's his status for the season?
Well, Bo's been kind of in and out of training camp. The luxury of Levi Mitchell, like like you said, like this is a face of the league type player, former MOP, Grey Cup MVP, like the best winning percentage in the league by a country mile. Like the guy's been elite ever since he came into the league. Had a bit of a shoulder issue in 2019, which caused him to miss quite a bit of time. So I had to go to Nick Arbuckle a lot, and he was really good. He ended up signing with the Toronto Argonauts and is expected to be the starter there. So they had a luxury with Nick here last year. Now they've got not the same luxury with their backup quarterbacks this year. You know, they got a guy in Dakota Prukop who has some CFL experience. Michael O'Connor's a Canadian who, you know, he's been in the CFL, but he hasn't played a ton. And then Jake Meyer, who's just come up from the States. So, you know, they don't have the same luxury of having Nick behind Bo. So they're just really taking it easy with him. I think that as we get into that first week of practice, obviously they want to see him ramp up his reps, his action, that type of thing. But Dave Dickinson, the head coach, told us on Monday that he wasn't worried about the injury right now. So right now it's kind of a wait and see thing. They're looking at it glass half full. It gives us an opportunity to really get an idea of what we're working with these three other quarterbacks. But I think that's where we're at with Bo Levi Mitchell. Like he's going to have some different receivers this year. There's going to be some things to get used to. But this team basically, like they need Bo Levi Mitchell to succeed.
Yeah, I gotcha. Now, what's interesting about this season, and it's actually a good time for even some Americans to get into the CFL, is because, you know, the team, took a year off. How does the team look like? I mean, you're only watching practices now versus they did in 2019.
Well, it's a completely different team. The roster's turned over a ton. Like a lot of change on the offensive line, a lot of change on the defensive line. Linebackers are different. Receivers have moved on. You know, the coaching staff has pretty much stayed the same. They've brought in some other guys. The defensive backfield is pretty much the same, consistent at least. Like there's some guys who have been with the team, but maybe haven't been in the role that they're expected to play this year. So there's been a lot of turnover heading into this season. And it's tough because there's no preseason games. So you can only evaluate certain positions to a certain extent because the Stampeders aren't even doing tackling like in training camp against each other.
Oh, really?
Out of an abundance of safety.
Yeah.
You know, like we talked about, these are guys that haven't played in 20 months. We had the Saskatchewan Roughriders with 4 Achilles injuries in a span of 6 minutes before camp started. So teams are being extremely cautious. The Stampeders, in fact, had their first Achilles injury over the weekend as well. So, like, it's something that, you know, it hits Saskatchewan hard, but it became to fruition here in Calgary as well over the weekend. So they're being extremely cautious. So it's been hard to evaluate. And we have to watch from the press box where typically we would be on the sideline. You can hear so much more because, like, you can watch a coach react to a player on the field and you have no idea if that is a positive or a negative reaction.
Yeah.
Like if you're there and you're hearing it, you know if it's a positive or negative reaction. But these guys are, you know, they're fired up all the time. So it's hard to tell from the press box.
And how are these guys looking? I mean, after taking a year off, do they seem sluggish? Are there some guys walking in overweight? Or they seem got a lot.
I don't know if any guys showed up overweight. I didn't dig in too much with that with the coach. If they did, they're probably cut by now. Just with the way the Stampeders like to kind of run their business around here. Like they've got guys that are banged up, but you know, I don't think it's any more sluggish than I would have expected. Like I'm not watching and being like, how are these guys professional football players? Like
they're pros.
Yeah, and it's practice too, right? Like a lot of special teams, but it's without contact. So I'm really excited for the first couple weeks of the season to really get an idea of what this team is. Because right now it's hard to say. You look around the league and everyone else had a ton of turnover, coaches changing. So, like, man, I'm finding it very hard to handicap how this year is going to go.
Well, it's at least looking at the players, what are some guys? Because I always feel like the best way to really learn about team and sports, I'm as a fantasy perspective, because that's collecting baseball cards is how I learned all the different baseball players back in the day. So what are some guys that fans should look out for aside from Bo Levi Mitchell with the Stamps?
Well, on the offense, the running back is probably going to be Kadeem Carey for the most of the season. A guy who's been in Calgary for a while, someone the coaching staff really likes. The interesting wrinkle here is in 2019, he was also hurt quite a bit. So him and Bo Levi Mitchell only actually played one game together.
Oh, wow.
So seeing that platoon out this season is going to be exciting. I think it brings a little bit of a dynamic that the Stamps might not have had with some of their other running backs in the past, as far as Carey can do a bit of everything. He can block, he can catch, he can run. Like, he can do whatever. He can go up the middle, he can go up the outside. He might not be the fastest guy, but he's still got some decent boots on him. So he's a guy I'd watch out for at the running back. But the big thing about the CFL is it's a pass-first league. Like, you want to be looking at the receivers. And it's an open slate here for Calgary. Like, it's not like Edmonton where you're like, oh, they've got Darrell Walker, who is like one of the elite in the league. Like, this is a group who they've got Kamar Jordan, who's been here for a long time. He's a veteran, and he's played very well, but he's also had a very serious knee injury where he tore 3 of the ligaments, and he's now in his 30s, and he's coming back from that. So is he going to be able to be the safety blanket that we really think he can be, that Bo really likes to go to? Hard to say. But they do have some other guys in the hopper, like Josh Huff, who had some experience down in the States. Markeith Ambles is another American who's got a shot to really contribute this season, a guy who's been up in Calgary for a few seasons now. Hergy Mayala is a Canadian who played down at the University of Connecticut. He's the guy who, last year, back half of 2019, he had an extremely it was a breakout type season. Like, he was in the running to be the Stampeders Rookie of the Year nominee. He didn't end up being the nominee. The nominee the Stampeders picked ended up winning the award for the entire league, just to kind of put that in perspective. And Mayala only really played the back half of the year, like, in a full-time role. So he's a guy that's poised for a breakout. But I would say probably those receivers, Richie Sindani is a guy who's been here for a while, and he'll get lots of snaps with the departure of Juwan Breskison. But it's going to be a offense by committee style here in Calgary, and it typically is. Like, this team has success when Bo is finding 9, 10, 11 different receivers over the course of a game. So
wow.
He's not necessarily the guy who likes to pick one dude and continuously go there. Like, he likes to go through his reads and find the open play, but he's also a guy who likes to have that security blanket for when things hit the fan. And I don't think we know who that is just yet, but we should find out.
Now, what about some guys on defense that fans should keep an eye on?
The big one for me is Jameer Thurman, someone who was here in 2018 with the Calgary Stampeders when they won the Grey Cup. He was the linebacker beside Alex Singleton, who plays for the Philadelphia Eagles now. Jameer left for the NFL down in Chicago after they won the Grey Cup, so he wasn't here in 2019. And then obviously the 2020 season was washed out, and then he returned in 2021. So he's pretty much the lock at linebacker. They're still trying to figure out who's going to play beside him at the will spot. But he's one to watch out for sure. He's a guy who's come out and said he wants to be the defensive player of the year, and he wants to lead the league in turnovers. So that's probably a guy that fans want to look out for.
Yeah.
In the backfield, they've got a great secondary. Jamar Wall plays the Sam linebacker. He's kind of like the quarterback, the main communicator of the secondary. Royce Mechie, the safety, is a young Canadian who the team is very high on. Raheem Wilson and Deshaun Amos will probably make up the boundary side. Amos spent some time with the Green Bay Packers after 2018. And then the other side is probably going to be Richie Leonard, who's a former All-Star that they brought in ahead of this season, probably paired with Jonathan Moxey, who's a younger guy with a lot of energy. And then on the D-line, that's the biggest question for this team, is who's going to get after the quarterback and create some pressure. They got a budding star in Mike Rose in the middle, kind of a, not nose tackle, but for lack of a better term, that's probably what would make sense. And then on the defensive end, Flair and Arimolade is the guy. Like, this is a team that's had an all-star at that position for a long time, like be it Charleston Hughes or Micah Johnson, or even Cordero Law in 2019. They don't necessarily have somebody with that pedigree this year, but Flair and Arimolade is the guy who could be that next superstar.
Oh, good. Now, for fans coming in that, used to the NFL and college game and they see the CFL game, what could they expect? I mean, you said like wide receiver heavy. What? I mean, I assume you've watched the NFL so what could fans expect watching a CFL game for the first time this year?
Chaos.
Chaos. Okay.
One of the things that I always say is like, it's good football, but the way that the rules work with the 20-second clock, which makes time go very fast rather than like the NFL where the final 2 minutes can last, half hour.
Right.
In the final 2 minutes of a CFL game, you can have 3 lead changes. These games are never out of reach. A team could be down by 21 going into the fourth quarter, and you're like, this game, like they need 5 minutes to get back into this thing. Because the other thing is it's 2 and out, right? You get 2 plays and you're done. And if you're passing the ball and you 2 drops, you're done. And how much time has gone off the clock? Because we're talking about a pass-heavy league, right? So you're looking at the clock stopping probably twice, and then you got a punt. Like the 2 and out, sometimes the team will have possession for 24 seconds on the clock. Oh, wow. And like, that's it. So I always say that it's an exciting game. A game is never out of reach. It might not be the cleanest game you ever seen. Like it's not technically sound, but they're a lot of fun. Like they are a ton of fun. The guys have a ton of personality. Like these are all stud players. A lot of them still think they have a chance for the NFL, and some of them do. So there's guys that could still go down. But this is a premier league of football. The rules are different, which I find creates a little bit more chaos. But yeah, it's a ton of fun.
I'm definitely, and I think what opened up the door for American fans is the idea that, because there is a definite thirst for football outside of the NFL. We saw Fan Control Football League did decent. The Spring League did okay. And on Fox, the XFL did okay. So and I think, so I'm really excited to finally watch some live games here soon. So now what's up going on with as far as fans in the stands at Stamps games? Like how is all that looking for the season?
Stampeders are selling tickets. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the number is going to be as far as capacity or anything along those lines. But they've got room. But the big thing I know is that they are selling tickets. Apart from that, I haven't really looked into it a ton myself. But there's going to be fans in the stands. The question is how many are there going to be and what are going to be the rules for getting in?
Right. Cool. All right. Well, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about the Calgary Stampeders. Looking forward to the season. If you want to let people know where they can find you on the social media stuff and give yourself a plug.
Yeah. Sportsnet 960 is the radio station I work for. You can find all of my Stampeders reports there. They go Monday to Friday. You can find them online. I also tweet them out. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Rose. YYC, 2 T's and Matt, pretty easy to find. And then the other thing that I will plug is I do have a podcast as well. It's called Not a Draft. We're on a bit of a hiatus right now, but it is me with a CFL receiver, Mike Klukas, formerly with the Stampeders, who's now out with the Ottawa Redblacks, where we just talk. It's not really a sports podcast. It's a Calgary podcast, but we have a lot of fun conversations. And yeah, if you're looking to kind of get to know myself or Mike, a CFL receiver, a little bit more and kind of understand how they tick, yeah, check it out.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate taking the time with us.
Be well. Appreciate you having me.